Welcome to Texture for the Stage. My name is Gary Hoff and I'm the head of design, resident scenic designer for the Nashville Repertory Theater. And I'm going to show you some really simple, easy techniques that'll add dimension and texture to your sets. Now, I'd love to see if you try one of these techniques. If you could send me a picture, that would be so awesome and we'd love to post it. So if you could send it to gary@nashvillerep.org, we would love to see what you do. Now let's get started on some of our techniques. Caulk. Now caulk, people go, you can't possibly be talking about the stuff I put around windows and doors and around the bathtub. Yes, the caulk you use around your bathtub. Yes, it's a great tool to use on the stage. It's cheap, it's easy, and it's water soluble. So what you're gonna need are the following items. You're gonna need tubes of caulk. Now caulk comes in different kinds, so make sure you're looking for the latex caulk, not the silicone caulk. The silicone caulk is often of a different color, and it will say silicone, but it gets a little confusing. So you don't want this for this project. This is a good use for other projects we'll probably get to later, but don't use this for this project. Now you want probably not the cheapest, but relatively inexpensive caulk. What I like to do is buy what's called the contractor packs at Lowe's and Depot. That way you get a lot of caulk, because what you'll find out is the more you use, the better. It really is a project that it's all about the more of the product looks better. So don't be skimpy. Use a lot of this. You'll need a pair of scissors. Now, I like scissors that are pointed, that have a taper to them, and you'll see why in just a minute. You'll need a caulk gun. This is called a caulk gun. This is what the caulk tube goes into, and this little plunger pushes the product out. But now there's different kinds of these as well. So look for one that has the pressure trigger on the back. That's the best kind to use for this kind of project. There are kinds that are called ratchets that have little teeth. Those don't work quite as well because you really need some fine control of your product. If you've ever had one of these and wondered what this little pin is for, it's not to poke people, don't do it. It's because on some kinds of tubes, like our silicone caulk, there's a membrane inside, and you need to poke that and open it up to let the product come out. You do not need that for latex caulk, which really saves you a step, which is great. There's also this little hole in the side. A lot of people don't know what that's for. That's actually a cutter. You can cut the caulk tube with it. I don't use that very often because it's not as neat and clean as I like, but if you don't have a pair of scissors, that's your tool right there. Some other things you'll need, always paper towels. Lots and lots and lots of paper towels. It's kind of a messy little trick. Also, skewers. Now you'll see in a minute why those are handy to use. But skewers work really well because they have a pointed end and a flat end. So you have a double-edged tool. A putty knife is always a good tool as well. And then there's a lot of things you can put into the caulk as well. And I'll show you some of those as we go along to show you some of the techniques that you can get even more detail. But first you need to learn how to do a few specific shapes with the caulk. So let's get started. So first of all, you're going to pull your plunger on your caulk tube back. Put your caulk tube in. Now, a lot of times people will say, cut it at an angle. You can, that's totally fine. I prefer to have it straight because then I don't have to figure out which way the angle goes. Depending on what you're doing, how big that hole is dependent upon you. So I can do it right at the end and do a really small hole. I usually do about halfway down, but you'll see the scissors kind of scrunched it together. That's why I use the tapered scissors. I use the scissors to round out the hole. So that's what the tapered scissors do for you. So here's what you need, the first kind of beginning steps you need to learn. First is the straight line. Now you think, oh, that straight line, that's probably the easiest. Oh no, that's the hardest. Because you have to, people can tell if something's straight or not. If something's curved or natural shaped, you can't tell as much. Straight lines are difficult. So on this board here, I'll show you how we're going to do that. You want to hold your caulk gun at about a 45-degree angle. You get it started because you can feel when the plunger hits the tube, and very evenly pull the caulk. Now you're only going to get so far on one squeeze, so when you get to that point, stop, don't keep moving, let the trigger reset, and then start and kind of keep going. If you're doing something really long, like a long piece of molding, make sure you have room to walk. So you not have any trip hazards, not any place to fall over, because you're going to have to walk down your piece. What makes it good about the trigger finger is once you're done, you let it go, and it lets go with the pressure on the tube. So, because if you don't, you'll look over, and all of a sudden there'll be a big pile of caulk on your table, which you don't want. So let go with the pressure every time. And so this is where the skewers come in and the putty knife. Now you could leave it like this. This is totally fine. This could be, it depends on what look you want. But if you want to clean it up some, you can use your skewer or you can use a putty knife. Now remember, you can only do this when it's really wet. If it begins to dry, it gets a skin over it, and then you can't really manipulate it anymore. So you have to do this really quickly. So I take the flat end straight up and down, and you can run it right along the edge and straighten out your caulk line. Again, paper towels. You can also use a putty knife. If there's room, you can do the same thing. You can run it along the edge and create a straighter edge to your caulk line. But one of the other things I like to do is embed things into the caulk, because it will accept just about everything. I mean, think what caulk will attach to, and it's just about everything. So I like to embed things in, and that helps me get a straighter line. So I love to use Bead Garland. Now this is the kind of stuff you get at Christmas. You can find it at Mardi Gras. It works really well. And what I like to do is lay it into the caulk, make sure it's well seated into the caulk, pair of scissors and cut off the excess. And to straighten it, what I like to do is put a fingernail on each of the end beads and then pull and slightly rock back and forth. And so that gives me a straight line. So this is one of the things I use a lot, because it actually gives another dimension and it straightens out my line. So this is something you'll probably need to practice a fair amount, because it is something you have to kind of learn how the caulk gun works. The next shape that you're going to have to learn is the teardrop. And the teardrop is going to be used for a lot of stuff. So the teardrop is probably one of the more important shapes you're going to have to learn. Now the teardrop, you hold your gun again at 45 degrees, again, make sure your plunger is all the way to the end. You create kind of a pillow, and then you pull back, slowly letting the pressure off the gun. So again, pillow, pull back, pillow, pull back. And then you have variations on that. Make sure you clean off your tip, where you can make it turn. So you go pillow, swirl, pillow, swirl, pillow, swirl. Or you can do just a straight pillow, which is again holding at 45 and making a little bun. And you'll notice that the tip will make impressions into the caulk. That's fine. You really don't, it doesn't matter if you're making impressions. If it bothers you, you can clean up your tip a little bit, take a pair of scissors again, maybe get some of those little pieces off, just to clean up your caulk patterns. So again, squeeze. Now you're gonna get these little snow caps. What you can do with those, either you can leave them, sometimes it looks really good with them, but if you don't like them, you can let it dry almost completely, but not quite, and you can punch them down. So if that bothers you, you can punch them down when you start. The other major thing you're going to do with these is the scroll. This kind of works for a lot of different styles and different periods, so the scroll is really important. I like to start in the middle of the scroll, but it's up to you. If you feel more comfortable with the outside of the scroll, that's great. What you want to try to do is try to let the gun lead the bead of caulk as much as possible. It's not going to happen all the time, but as much as possible. And by what of that, I mean the bead is behind the gun, and you're not pushing it. Again, sometimes that's going to happen, but try to make that not happen. So for a scroll, I start in the middle, and then around, gradually getting bigger. And it's not always perfect the first time. And again, this is not kind of a technique that perfection is really something you're looking for. It's more about the overall appearance of it. So I often will do it more than once. And you can add adjacent ones to it. So those are the major techniques you're going to need to learn when you're doing it. So we have the straight line, the teardrop, the curved teardrop, the pillow, and the scroll. And as you'll probably find out, you probably can, can do a lot of other things, but these are the major ones you're going to want to start with. Now, people often ask me, oh, this looks like cake decorating. Can I use a cake decorator? Yes and no. The cake decoration does work, and you can use caulk for cake decorating. You can make a fake cake and frost it with caulk. You can even color it. Since it's a latex, it's a water-based product, and you can use colored food coloring. But what you'll find is straight out of the tube, it's too dense to use in a pastry tube. So you have to thin it down some. So it's a little tricky, it's a little more difficult to do, and I think it's a little harder on the hands. So for big projects, I do not do it. But if I was doing a cake, you absolutely can use a pastry tube with a decorative tip. But just remember, don't use it straight out because it is really too dense and you will blow the end off your pastry tube, which I've done. So don't do that. So let's get started on a project. This is going to be a molding, and this is a molding I actually did for a production called Cabaret that we did in 2013. Always label your patterns so you know where they came from and what they are. Trust me, you'll want them again. So make sure you keep a good archive of all your patterns. I keep everything I can keep. The pattern depends on what you want to do. So if you're doing a play at a certain period, do some research, find out about that period, what kind of decorations were used during that period, and then find moldings and carved pieces and whatever you can find to get your ideas for your caulk molding. I usually like to do a repeating pattern. Let me turn it this way. I like to do it on craft paper because it's a nice strong paper, and it holds up well. But also, if I'm doing a repeating pattern, I'd like to be able to use a light table, and then I can repeat the pattern without having to try to figure it out or make sure it looks right. I can actually just reproduce it by folding it in half. The caulk design is kind of more the shape and the spacing than it is about exactly where the caulk's going to go. This is just a reference to me to know, okay, here's where I want to scroll, here's where it has to repeat. This was a fairly long piece, so this would have been a complete piece. So the first thing you want to do, now I've already added the border to this piece, so that would have not have happened yet. I like to use carbon paper, which is this nice, fun looking paper. Whoops. It's a little harder to find than it used to be, but you still can find it. The one thing to always make sure is use the dark side and not the light side down. If you put the dark side up, you'll be tracing your pattern onto your pattern. Not a good idea. So I lay out the carbon paper down the whole piece, and then I put on the pattern, keeping it really flat. Now, if it's something like this, where it's a single piece and it's fairly flat, I can actually use binder clips and clip the pattern down. If not, you can tape it down, but binder clips work really well for something that you can have access to the edge. I trace it with a pen, and then I take it off. Now, if you take it off and you go, oh, it doesn't look so good, there's nobody saying and nobody watching, so you can go back and fix it. And it is sometimes, when I'm using binder clips, sometimes I'll like unhook one end and fold it back to see if I've gotten everything, because sometimes they get really complicated. So you can fold it back, you find out something you didn't do, fold it back down, because the other binder clips are holding it in place, you're good to go. So once you get this far, what you need to start thinking about is, what do you want in front of what? Now what I mean by that is, things are going to overlap other things. So what's the most important and what do you want forward? Now I know that I want my scroll and this fan shape forward, so which means these smaller scrolls are going to be behind. So what that means is, I'm going to do the smaller scrolls first, and then I'm going to do the bigger scrolls. So let me do that. Again, holding your gun at 45 degrees, I start in the middle, and around, and up. If you can move your piece around so you can get a better angle at doing it, that's great. Or if you can walk to either side, that's great too. Sometimes you can't, and you're going to be in some weird situations, but if you can, that's always great. So again, round and down. Round and down. Round and down. So that gets my back ones ready. So now I'm going to do the front ones. Turn this around again. Again, it depends on what you're more comfortable with, which way you go. So the first thing I'm going to do is the scroll. And remember that you don't have to just do this once. So if it screws up, you can go over it again. And don't be afraid, if it really screws up, scrape it off, throw it away, start again. No big deal. Done it many times. So I want to outline basically where my fan shape is going to be. Like so. Again, remember to let go of your pressure on your trigger. Now here's where you probably want to find a way that is easiest for you to work with, because you're going to be doing large teardrops. And it's easier in certain configurations. So I like to be able to pull from left to right, because that's what I'm most comfortable with. If you're comfortable in another way, totally cool. So again, with a teardrop, remember, it's pillow, pull, pillow, pull. And I like to work from the outside in on these. This also works for a shell shape, for leaves you can do, which I'll show you in a minute. And so we have the finished product. Now you might find that at the end of the fan, because you have so many teardrops coming together, it looks a little messy. So that's where I'll often use, again, maybe some beads. No, let's say, if you're doing something, I say do repeating numbers. So let's say 6 beads. 6 beads sounds like a good number. So again, we can put those into the caulk, kind of continuing that arc. And I also like to use glass beads. Glass beads are great because they're really strong. They're really easy to get. You can get them at any craft store, Walmart. They're usually done for putting into vases and that kind of thing, but they work really good for that. They are irregular, so don't try to be perfect. If you sit and try to find perfect beads, you're going to be there for the rest of your life. So just find ones that are close to what you want. And then I'm going to add some beads, again, following the line of the fan. Now, one thing you have to take into consideration when you start this project is, before you can do anything else, the caulk has to completely set. And that could take 2 days, 3 days, even a week. I often will do these projects at the beginning of the process of doing a production, so by the time I'm ready to work with them, they're completely dry. The other thing you have to take into consideration is they need to dry flat. So you need to find some place, have it ready, because you don't want to be trying to find a place once you've done all this. So what you want to do is find a place that you know they can stay for a fairly long period of time and they can dry flat. So when you get this and it's completely dry, you can paint it. And this is what the finished product would look like. Now you can still do other things with this. You can fill in the back area with colors, you can shadow, you can do a whole bunch of things with this. But this, you know, so you can just spray it, which is totally fine. The Caulk takes spray paint great. So that's a good thing to do. Pretty easy. The other thing you can do with Caulk is do individual pieces that you can apply to other things. And you're going to use the same techniques used before. I've used this mostly with like flowers or leaves or things like that, where I want to create kind of a, you know, bountiful basket of things or something like that. But it's the same product. What you want to do is either you can do this straight on a table, but again, you need to make sure you can leave it there for an extended period of time and nobody's going to be messing with it. If you can, it's always good to do kind of a board that you can move someplace and put out of the way. Cover the board with plastic. It can be painter's plastic, it can be saran wrap, just some kind of plastic. It doesn't be super heavy, it doesn't need to be super strong, just some plastic. And you're going to do the same techniques. So let's do a leaf. So we know what a leaf shape looks like. So you can do a number of ways to do a leaf. We can do a leaf and I have just ran out of caulk. So, and that's fine, you're gonna do that, you're gonna run out of caulk right in the middle of something, it always happens. But as long as all your tools are ready, you'll be good to go. So you can also use your skewer to make veins, if you would care to. So that's one. Again, if you want to clean it up with your flat end of your skewer, that's great. So you can let that dry, and once it's dry, you can actually peel it off. You can also do kind of a leaf look that's more using your teardrops, where you do so you can do a teardrop with it. We can also do a flower with it. So we can do, again, the teardrops. And again, if you want to take the time, which I'm obviously not doing, and turning your piece so you're always doing a teardrop towards you, that's probably best, but I'm not doing that right now. So it looks a little messy. So what we can do is we can add a bead in the middle and we get a flower. One of the other things you can do is embed wire into it. So let's do another leaf. And use some wire. Now you're going to want some wire that's pretty sturdy because this is going to shape your piece once you lift it up. So you don't want something that's really light, like a really fine wire. You need something that's got some stability to it. I often use floral wire. You can find it in the floral section. It's got a good strut to it. You can also find some wire at Home Depot or Lowe's and those places as well, but look for something that's fairly strong. What you want to do is embed it, and you kind of push it down and rock it back and forth so it's nicely set, and then I do another bead over top of it. All these are individual flowers and leaves, and I put them on with caulk as the adhesive. again, I use the Bead Garland around the edge. So what this allows me to do is I don't have to decide exactly where everything goes. I can kind of place it, and because it's caulk, I can trim it, I can cut it, I can move it around. So it works really well. But with the wire, what you can do is what I did on our friend, the fountainhead. So all of these leaves are exactly the same as what I showed you, but you notice they've got curves to them. That's because there's a wire embedded in them that's allowing that curve to happen. So all of these pieces have wire in them so I can do these curved effects. If I didn't, I could not be able to do that. So it's really pretty simple, but an easy thing to do. If you want to make a fountainhead, this is just a mask like you can get at Party City. So pretty easy, a little piece of PVC pipe, a couple washers, and paint it. This is called a patina. When you have something that's copper, which is what's underneath, it patinas. So if you've ever seen the Statue of Liberty and wonder why it's green, because it was once copper. So it turns this green patina color. So that's something fun you can do, and you can use these on picture frames. You can use these on all kinds of different items, prop-wise and set-wise. Something else you can do is, get this one back. You can incise the caulk with different different things. So one of the things I like to do is this technique where I can use, it's a popsicle stick. And this is good if you want like kind of a faux welding effect. And usually you need to let this sit for a while, but what you want to do is just pop it, and you get a raised kind of effect. Techniques. So let me show you some examples of pieces I've done and what you can do with them. This is for a production of Importance Being Earnest, and you see there's a lot of caulk going on. Now if you look really closely, it's not that specifically detailed, it's not perfect, but overall it looks really good from a distance, and that's what you want. This is where I was talking about filling in the background with color. So you can paint it one color and put behind the other color. So that's one technique. Because it's caulk, it also is flexible. So these bands are on the top of these columns are poster board with caulk on them. And just put it around the column, glue it down, and the caulk will move that way. You can also make it look like wood by painting it and staining it. So that's a really good effect, and it really looks very realistic from the stage. So that's a very good look. As I said, the decorations can be whatever you want. This was a production of God's Man in Texas. And you see there's a specific motif that we went with across all of it. So that's a good way to tie your set together, is with a specific look. This is what our friend Mr. Fountainhead looked like in space when it was on its little set. So in space, that's what Mr. Fountainhead looked like. The other thing you can do with this is you can use it to do props. Props are a great thing to use this for. So this is a stand I made for 39 steps. And again, they need to be patterned. And this is what the pattern looked like. Every piece on it was patterned. So that's the pattern. That's what we cut out. And you've noticed I just kind of sketched in. So this is just a reminder to me of how I want to put the caulk on. I could put this right on the piece. I don't remember if I did or not. But it just is a reminder saying to me, oh yeah, I want to put beads there. I want a fan there. I want some teardrops there. So that's a good way to remind yourself what you want. So that is texturing with caulk. I hope you have a good time, and this is going to be a fun project for you. Always remember, keep your hands clean and keep a lot of paper towels on hand. Thank you so much.